Specific date of birth of Anne Boleyn is unknown. It is known that she was born sometimes around 1505 into Boleyn family. She was a middle child and a second daughter of Thomas Boleyn, a trusted diplomat of the English king. Her father insisted on educating her and her older sister Mary, while their brother George was being educated to take the reins of family destiny. Anne and her sister were being prepared to find favorable marriages for themselves that would also be beneficial to the family. The sisters, when Anne was 6, were sent to the French court to serve the French queen. The French court was perceived as a center of culture and class, so it was not unusual for the nobles around Europe to send their offsprings to learn and craft their social skills over there. She will spend some 14 years on the French court. Her sister Mary became a mistress to the French king Francis I for a while. When he got bored of her, she found refuge in the beds of other powerful men. Hearing about this, her father Thomas recalled her back to England and placed her in the service of English Queen Catherine in English court, where she would soon become mistress to the English king Henry VIII. Mary will marry William Carey, a good friend of the king. There were rumors that their children were actually king's children. Anne was the opposite of her sister when it came to romance. She was quite impressive to men because of her intelligence and wit, but it stopped on just being impressive. At the age of 20, she was transferred, in lack of a better word, to the English court to serve the queen. The moment King saw her, he was mesmerized. The king tried to seduce her, but all his tries were futile. In an act of almost desperation, he offered her a title of chief mistress. It was the position a French king had for their favorite mistresses, but Anne said no. She was planning on marrying son of Earl of Northumberland, Henry Percy. Call it love, disinterest, chastity, or whatever, but she was not planning on becoming a king's mistress. King Henry was in marriage with Catherine, daughter of Spanish king, also his late brother's widow, for 12 years at this point. They had one daughter, Mary, and no sons. A serious inconvenience for Henry, especially when considered the way his father took the throne was somewhat shady. The only way out of marriage was either death or permission by the Pope. Since killing a Spanish princess would piss off Spanish king, the only way out of this marriage for Henry was permission by the Pope, which would also piss off the Spanish king, so it wasn't happening. He tried to get annulment of his marriage on the grounds that it was a sin to marry his brother's widow, but the thing is, the Pope gave them permission to marry in the first place because they said the marriage between Catherine and his older brother was never consummated, which was most likely a lie. But the king's desire for a son coincided with religious movement in Europe. The Reformation, when Martin Luther questioned the authority of the Pope amongst other things, happened in 1517. Thomas Boleyn, being a diplomat, had his encounters with people from mainland Europe and took a keen interest in this new form of Christianity. When King finally decided that he wanted a male heir and still not giving up on Anne Boleyn, he expressed publicly his desire to marry Anne Boleyn. She probably introduced him to writings of Martin Luther, brought into the country by her father. Now the things get interesting. Cardinal Wolsey was the most powerful clergy figure in England. He was advisor to the king for years, and now his power gets challenged by the Boleyns. Being a son of butcher, he was also always despised by the nobles. He was put in charge by Henry to convince the Pope to annul the marriage, but the Pope did not want to do such a thing. Soon all of Europe was talking about King Henry's marriage. Catherine was also refusing to go along with King's plan. In the meantime, Anne Boleyn's court status by the end of 1528 had been elevated. She was no longer in service of Queen Catherine. Instead, she was given her own household with servants. So everything was set in place. He just needed that small favor of annulment by the Pope. There was also a biological component to this. Anne was soon turning 30, which in the 16th century was already considered middle age, and the king was not getting younger either. In 1531, Queen Catherine was sent off to the countryside. Mary, her 15-year-old daughter with the king, had been declared illegitimate. In January 1533, Henry finally married Anne. In September the same year, she will give birth to their daughter, Elizabeth. So England at this point had two queens, and nobody was sure what to make of that. So English Parliament decreed that King's marriage to Catherine had never been legal, and recognized Anne as his only true wife. The following year, Anne's second pregnancy resulted in miscarriage, followed by 2 more miscarriages. The people started to talk that problem was with the king and not his wives. Unwilling to admit such a thing, after years of courtship, he decided maybe it's time to look for another wife. The king put in charge Thomas Cromwell, his chief minister, to find a way to get rid of his wife number 2. Cromwell employed numerous spies, paid witnesses close to Anne, and soon rumors about her started circulating. There were 2 options: charge Anne with treason, which is punishable by death, or cheating on the king. Cheating was much more easier to prove, regardless was it true or not. So a woman who resisted King Henry's advances for 7 years was charged with cheating on her husband with many men, including her own brother. The marriage with the king lasted about 1,000 days. On May 15th, 1536, she was put on trial and found guilty on all accounts. 4 days later, she was executed. King Henry VIII will finally get a son with his 3rd out of 5 wives, Jane Seymour. His son, Edward VI, will outlive his father only by 6 years and die at the age of 15. Ironically or not, the throne will then pass on to his half-sisters, Mary and Elizabeth, daughters of Queen Catherine and Anne Boleyn.